just get started. Everyone, I'm Alex Thomas, West Willow Community Advocate, and I grew up in the neighborhood of West Willow. We sit right to the west of the historic Willow Run bomber site where 2 automobile factories were founded afterwards. They closed in 1992 and 2010, respectively. I moved here in '76, grew up here, moved around the country a bit, came back here in 2004. From 2004 to 2008, I was financial aid counselor at the University of Michigan Medical School. I say I was a slacker until I was 38. In 2008, I was 38, and just being frustrated and being in a position where slackers are at that age, I felt like I was stuck at the University of Michigan, and I overheard someone going to France to teach English. I thought, wow, that's how I could get to India. I always had wanted to go there. Did some research. It was a great demand for English teachers in China. So in 2008, I went to, after taking a teaching course, volunteering at U of M in a foreign language school for a semester, January 2008, I went to China for 8 years. Loved it. Came back here in 2016 and just saw the decline in West Willow, Ypsilanti Township, and was wondering what the hell happened. That led to a career in community advocacy. I did not know what I was going to do when I returned here, but I Ubered for a year, which was great. I got to get a feel of Southeastern Michigan, kind of get back in the mix, had a Rip Van Winkle thing going on after being out of the country for 8 years. But it really made you attuned to the differences. And it really gave you an objective way to look at how decisions are made locally. I'd always paid attention to global national government. I, like many, didn't really appreciate the distinction between Ypsilanti City and Ypsilanti Township. And I always quote anyone that knows me in that advocacy circle that Ypsilanti Township, the second largest municipality in Washtenaw County, 55,000 people, Ann Arbor's first with 120,000. But we get conflated so much with the city that I love, the city of Ypsilanti, 21,000. But we are almost 3 times larger in population and 7.5 times larger geographically, which is so, I think, integral to this conversation today. So many people just know of my name from provocative posts on Facebook, but that's that forum, and we need to get people's attention. A lot of people don't pay attention to these issues. So I'm glad it worked, and I got some people here. This is a different forum. I want to invite everyone to feel comfortable, participate. I'm just very excited to talk about Ypsilanti Township and that advocacy role. At many meetings in Ann Arbor at the county level, and I feel like I'm the sole Ypsilanti Township person there. So this is awesome to have people that are just really focused on Ypsi Township, seriously concerned. I don't want to keep blathering on. I wanted to give an introduction of myself and give time for other people to get admitted before I introduce my other panelist, Mr. Jamie Lau. I'm going to admit a few other, and Jamie, I'm going to unmute you.
Unmuted, but it goes.
Oh, you are unmuted.
Yeah.
Welcome, Jamie.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. I appreciate it. So I go back since about 2008 with my efforts in this arena, kind of towing the line of activism, advocacy, business, political, legal considerations. Helped to start the first dispensary working transparently with the city in the state, which is in the city of Ypsilanti. It was Third Coast. Now it is called Oz, but it's been operating ever since 2009. I most recently, in terms of activism and advocacy, was one of the authors of the legalization language. And right now I work with a licensed retailer as Director of Advocacy and Social Equity.
Thank you. Jimmy, did you, are you with us yet? You were in transit before. Oh, welcome, Trustee Wilson.
Can you see me?
Yes.
All right, there we go. How you doing?
Great. Thank you for coming.
No problem.
Would you like to introduce yourselves to the audience
Jimmy
here?
Wilson.
And let them know
I'm on the Board of Trustees in Ypsilanti Township. I was elected in 2016 and re-elected in 2020. Like Alex probably already mentioned, you know, this has kind of been brewing for a while now. I mean, the voters kind of voted one way in 2018, and here we are in 2021. And unfortunately, Ypsilanti Township still doesn't have anything on the books. But I hope that this year will be the change as we do more community outreach. And I kind of noticed that I personally probably need to get a little more hands-on with this because, as to my understanding, our planning consultants would have at least brought something to us that we could critique and make some adjustments with based on what other communities are doing, but that still has not happened. So here we are, and I just hope to get a lot of information that I can take back to my board and then start to just be more hands-on with this particular subject.
Thank you for being here, Trustee Wilson. And you mentioned the work with the planner, getting it in the hands, and I think that's a good place to start off. For the audience, I got engaged in this issue in, I believe, May of 2018, I think is when the township board at that time voted to ban, to put in place a ban on recreational cannabis. And that was as a result of the state law being passed that allowed for recreational cannabis. It also allowed for local municipalities to opt out if they wanted to. I had previous to the May of that year just assumed that we would jump right in because that proposal 1 in 2018, it passed by, to be completely honest, I think it was 63%. I've seen in some other media sources 68, and I like to quote, say, hey, there were, but according to Washington site, about 63%. So so I was just assuming that reflective of the voters' wills that the township board would seriously engage in good faith with the issue. They immediately put in place a ban, except for Trustee Wilson, who was a trustee at the time too. Then he was the only one that voted against that ban. When at the next meeting when I attended, the previous clerk was Karen Lovejoy Rowe. After some discussion, her, and I remember her language, we're going to give it to Dick. And Dick is Richard Carlisle of Carlisle and Associates, the longtime planner for the township board. A few months after that, and there's an email chain where I emailed Carlisle and Associates to try to see what was going on. Benjamin Carlisle, his son, replied back and said that they were waiting to hear from the township, that they wanted to do some vigorous public engagement, figure out what's the best plan for Ypsilanti Township. A few more emails I didn't get returned after a couple months. About a year later, when I re-engaged, said they didn't hear anything. He said nothing was going on, hadn't heard anything. And then just in media, I noticed that he was on the board of Pittsfield Township's cannabis. I don't know exactly what the entity is, but it's under the auspices of Pittsfield Township government exploring their policy. But anyway, he was there, not working on Ypsi Township. I don't blame him. I think he's under the instruction of township government is the only thing I can assume. He's a consultant and he can only do what the client asks. But that's what really frustrates me when I hear this is going on 3 years after the law is passed. And my understanding is the township wants to ban for another year, have that in place. And I've heard, I don't know how valid this is, but because I wasn't there, I didn't hear verbatim, but I heard that because of COVID and how that would impede public engagement, that was the reason. And I just thought that was ridiculous because we well into COVID. We're here engaging. This is some of the most healthy public engagement that I've had. And it's labeled as an essential service through the pandemic. And it's, I think, because of the pandemic and the potential for the revenue that it can generate, the social equity component that's part of the law. I mean, we're talking about the most distressed communities in Ypsilanti Township that have been impacted by marijuana laws and law enforcement prohibition. And that's written into the law. So I just don't see the sense of urgency that I think this deserves. And that's why I created this forum. And before I turn it over to Jamie and anyone else, because I want to hear his expert opinion as one of the co-authors of the law. When I look at Ypsilanti Township, and I see it adjacent to Ann Arbor, the distribution capital for Michigan for cannabis, it would seem that we're in a unique position to be a cultivation hub. We're 7.5 times larger, as I said geographically earlier, a large rural area. We have lots of properties that are going to be in transition, over the next 20 years. And just for those reasons, you think about the economies of scale argument. You look inside of the environmental industry and just the broader green, no pun intended, what kind of industry. It's always better to consume things closer to where it's grown. It's more efficient. And it would just seem, if we had forward-thinking, imaginative minds in the room working on behalf of Ypsi Township, that we are really in a unique position to get a leg up on other municipalities, because they're not uniquely suited like we are. And that's why I kind of pull back when I think about hearing outside consultants and experts, because there's some rich community people that are integrally tied to Ypsi Township or that live here, that are very well versed in the recreational cannabis industry, have worked in it. They can inform us. No one knows that area better. And I'm always throughout this just really wary of those Walmarts of cannabis, to for lack of a better word, because of the price points for entry and just the issues involved for them blocking out the local people. So I would just like, a creative, oh wow. And I did the oh wow because of one of my other experts. I'll let him introduce himself after Jamie. A Mac Wagoner, some of the people may know. One of those local experts that I'd like to help it in this discussion. But that's how I'd like to frame it, to seriously close out. Just if we enter the discussion in good faith and try to think about what's best for Ypsilanti Township, it's an incredible opportunity. And I like to think from that perspective and let our decisions be data driven and by people from Ypsilanti Township. So Jamie, did I get anything? Am I off? Any thoughts? Ring an endorsement?
No, it sounds great. Is there an echo there for everybody else?
No, you're great.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here, I guess, but the idea that you'd like to have the township opt in and take advantage of this rare opportunity in an emerging industry makes a lot of sense. And many places have. In Northeast Michigan, very rural and a lot of low income and not a lot of opportunity, took advantage of this early and often, starting with Pinconning and just moving up the lake there. A lot of places.
Can you give us? I'm sorry. Can you give us an idea about the numbers? Like, what were marijuana sales like last year? Now,
well, we're gonna reach 1 billion. It's weird to talk about it because there's two different parallel commercial programs, one for medical and one, and the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act and the Michigan Regulate Tax and Marijuana Act. In the beginning, after about a year or so ago, or a little bit over, after the MRTMA was enacted and started moving a little bit, the medical sales were larger, and then as the year progressed, the MRTMA overtook the medical, and it's going to reach about 1 billion, and it's just getting started. There's a lot of room for growth. In fact, Colorado, which has a much smaller population than us, just hit 2 billion. And these are way over, like the estimates were much less than this. So these numbers are coming in way, they thought maybe we might, in a seasoned market here in Michigan, get up to 1.75, 2 billion. Now it's pretty obvious that 3 billion is the number and more that we're talking about.
The 954, I heard 954 million for last year. Was that just recreational, or is that cannabis? Is that medical also?
I think that is a combined number of the commercial industry. I am not positive, though. I think that is the case.
And I mentioned the cultivation aspect before. One thing that I wasn't aware of until getting into just more intensely into it, understanding the hemp market just the research and also industrial. Hemp for non-consumption, but like industrial, talking about edibles.
It's for consumption too.
And hemp. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a different crop though, or?
Yeah, it is. So, I mean, I guess this is kind of a side conversation, but what's going on with hemp right now, a lot more than anything else, is like plants that are good for extracting CBD to put into other products or to smoke without a lot of THC being present. A lot of, that's popular for a lot of people. So that's what's primarily being grown for some foods. There's other structures of plant that you grow to get fiber and things like that. And then it can be used as raw material as the basis for tens of thousands of products. That type of stuff hasn't really kicked in as much yet. That's slow coming. You need to get like manufacturing plants going that want to use that as a raw material and that kind of stuff. But right away, the stuff for foods and CBD and consuming it and stuff like that is up and running, and that's doing well in its second year.
In so many areas of Washington County, you have a lot of passionate people and informed that are disconnected and working in different silos. And I see, like, in that industrial market, we have a world-class University of Michigan. There's within the U of M school, business school, there's a Green Wolverines, a Cannabis. There's just real opportunity if we take advantage of what we have right here and jump.
It's amazing. Yeah. In fact, one of the guys, Adam, who helped us start a Green Wolverine, graduated and is now pretty big in the hemp industry. So that all worked out, from that angle for him. But go ahead, Alex. I'm sorry.
Well, I wanted to just get that point about the size of the market, and then also when we're thinking of growth, I think oftentimes people just think in this discussion locally, as we're talking about putting dispensaries here and there next to the house, and talk about smell in the air, and not just. That's why I listed this as an adult conversation, as a business person, capitalists coming in, hopping in, how they would look at this product and what the projection looks like for this area over the next 20, 25 years. And those other industries, I think, are a real important part that need to be in that conversation.
A lot of those stores, and obviously in Washtenaw County in general, Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, also took advantage of this from early on, and kind of on their own, either were tolerant or issued licenses, as was the case in the city of Ypsilanti. So there is something to look toward right, nearby, and the amount of dispensaries when they have their associated cultivation. A lot of them want to be ultimately vertically integrated so they can supply themselves to their own cultivation company, but some buy from other cultivators. But all of those stores there, probably some of them would like to have their cultivation centers closer and have their vertically integrated operation all in one kind of area. And the agricultural area and the light industrial areas around Ypsilanti Township could probably help to feed that. Don't know for sure, who would do that. There's other opportunities that could be taken there too. The retail stores or the micro businesses each create a unit of share in the tax revenue generation. That's a good reason to do it in and of itself. And of course, the social equity opportunities that are there, and that can be shaped with the local ordinance if there's an opt-in and that kind of stuff, and give it some teeth. Detroit was probably the most aggressive so far. City of Ypsilanti with Andy Somerville did do some extra stuff. I mean, that was a good start. A lot of people thought it might not be deep enough, but Detroit tried to give it some teeth. There's something there to look at.
Well, as frustrated as I was and angered by the ban, I can admit it does give us an opportunity here to look back and see what not to do. We can, and that's why I'm saying starting fresh. What we see in Detroit that you mentioned, those the legacy. Well, I'll allow people. I'll throw some clips up here with it. But basically, I mean, 30, 20-year residents really have a leg up and a real much lower bar for entry into the market and have a strong competitive advantage. I'd love to see something maybe even stronger here specific to, and it comes down so much in the Ypsilanti Township discussion. Like when you're at the county level, when you start talking about Ypsilanti Township, immediately Ypsilanti City comes in and the discussion strays. We're not talking about Ypsilanti Township. And then when I speak about Ypsilanti Township and talking about the most distressed areas, like, or the Ypsi area, when I talk about West Willow or Sugar Brook, or even in Superior, I consider that part of the Ypsi area, but not part of this discussion here, but this is Ypsi Township. But when you talk about the most distressed areas, or just say Ypsi Township, you're going to talk about Whitaker Road and Huron River Drive. You're not going to talk about the most distressed areas. That's what I wanted to clearly say. When you talk about Ypsi Township, we're talking about the more affluent areas. Naturally, the conversation strays, and we don't discuss enough. In this cannabis, work in cannabis, what came to my attention, and I wish I would have recognized it earlier, is with that 21,000 population of Ypsi City, with a 30% poverty rate, that represents about 6,000 people. But with Ypsilanti Township at about 55,000, with a 16% poverty rate, it's about 9,000 people. So a larger population. And I put that out because in the original iteration of the social equity component of the state law, there were 20 cities, I believe, that were picked because they had the 30% poverty rate and also had marijuana arrests that were higher than the state average. And within those guidelines, Ypsi Township, we were cut out anyway because of the ban, but the most distressed areas are totally out of that. So, and in so many other discussions, if we talk about housing, mental health, criminal justice, the way the statistics are viewed and the way the discussion is skewed is it leaves out those most distressed areas. But Jamie, I want to try to shut up, let you go, and after you share what you want, I want to get to some of the common objections that people have and concerns. Try to knock those out of the way. But I want to whatever would you like to share, please?
Well, I guess just some bits of information to know, and moving forward with considering this stuff. The medical program, one way or another, is going to go away. The Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act will either be legislatively combined into one license with the adult use license, or will fail on its own because it's not as competitive as the other system. So and most of the stuff we're talking about here comes from the MRTMA, the opportunities, the share in revenue, all that kind of stuff. And as of March 1st, I believe it is no longer required for an operator to first have the medical license before achieving the next adult use license. So that the medical program, it could be a consideration, but I'm not convinced that it has to be right now in order to do the stuff that we're talking about. But it should be known that it's two separate considerations. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said thanks.
Yep.
But I don't want to interrupt you, and I did. But after, I want to get to just the common objections and things.
No, that's fine. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. I think that it's generally a positive move, and areas right around the state are demonstrative of that. We'll talk about what these objectives are, but I'm not familiar with any real issues taking place, even since before the formal state recognized commercial acts, even when it was being accepted purely on a local basis. We never saw the issues that a lot of people were concerned about. And the jobs it creates, the improvements to the area, the drawing of people in, real estate, all that stuff improves. I know some of the things say that some of the concerns are that real estate values go down and and crime goes up and all that kind of stuff. There is no basis for those assertions. The exact opposite happens, and that can be demonstrated around the country. But we can look at our own backyard and see it too right now.
Thank you. Speaking of our own backyard, on Sunday of last week, I didn't know I'd be having this discussion today. It was, I've been really busy in that housing and criminal justice forum, and then I started getting emails. I was like, oh, wow, and had to pull up the cannabis file. and that first, those first emails were to you, Annie Somerville. There's a story in Second Wave Media about how can we increase social equity in cannabis? And in that story, there was a Robin Pott, that a child advocate and U of M law grad, that opened a cultivation facility called Potts Farms in Augusta Township. I emailed her, spoke to, well, got replies from both, just the timing, they couldn't be here, but they'll be part, Annie's dying to be part of this discussion. He'll be a great guy, a guide. The other person though is Mark Wagoner, who's here, the Grizzly Asm. I know you get that all the time. I'm just so happy to see you, man. He's a good friend. I haven't seen him in a long time because of COVID. Can you unmute and contribute? Awesome. Can you please just introduce yourself and what you have to offer about cannabis and why I'm so excited to have you in this discussion.
Well, thanks, Alex. Thanks for inviting me. And everything said so far, Jamie, that I've picked up on. Sorry, I was a bit late. Yeah, spot on. I've been kind of an advocate for quite a while because I came back from Silicon Valley to take care of my mom, who had lost her mother and her third husband back in 2001. And she was developing signs of Alzheimer's, and I was one of the only family members that was going to be able to take care of her. So I did a bunch of research. And the reason that I'm so into hemp and cannabis was that I found that if I fixed the microbiome that she had, if I focused on the microbiome first and got all her blood work in the right range for her age and gender, there were several components of cannabis that worked exceptionally well for Alzheimer's. In particular, CBGA, which is a precursor, as you know, and it has receptors on neurons for CBGA. Now, if a cell has receptor sites.
Hey, Mark, for perspective for people, CBGA is one of the cannabinoids on the cannabinoid profile. THC and CBD are more well known.
Yes.
But it is another one, and CBGA is its acid form.
Yes.
But just so people know, he's talking about like another component of the plant that's very good for you.
Yeah, and as a precursor, because it comes before CBDA and THCA, which are the more well-known CBD and THC acid forms. So a precursor is actually a targeted stem cell. That's what it means by being, it's a targeted stem cell. It can turn into these various things that are needed based on what are called cofactors in the environment. And I know this gets a bit technical, but when I explain this to doctors, they get it right away and understand that, oh my gosh, this guy's onto something. Because what we found with my mom was that after getting her microbiome in good shape, she started taking a concentration of CBD with very low THC content, but it was a full spectrum concentrate in low doses, but also a raw form of hemp that contained up to 13% back in 2013 of CBGA. And this CBGA was so potent as a precursor. With the microbiome in good shape, she had all the right cofactors that we now think that CBGA is possibly neurogenic, meaning it can repair neurons. And if this is an organic compound that can repair neurons, it would certainly explain why my mother recovered over 90% from late stage Alzheimer's.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, refresh me, because we haven't spoken at length for a little over a year. Did you have some federal funding for research, or was that coming on, or had you taken place, or
there's no funding in the care economy. When you're taking care of a parent or even children, you don't have a lot of subsidies. And so, no, I was doing this while taking care of her because I could do nothing else but do research, because that's what I do. I mostly, my career has been in high tech, but I did study a lot of physiology and biochemistry while I was at the University of Michigan, as well as a few other places. So it made it easy for me to do this research. But to recover 90% from late stage Alzheimer's with little to no side effects whatsoever, at least negatives, no negative side effects, it's so dramatic. I mean, going from being bedridden and losing control of her bowels and bladder and not knowing who I am 75% of the time, to playing bridge, dancing twice a week, winning at bridge, 900 holes of miniature golf, you know, over undulating terrain, laughing, joking, socializing, going dancing twice a week, inviting people over. This is a remarkable recovery. And I don't need anyone to tell me that that's not good. And it's universally good for people, because the microbiome is one of the critical pieces that's coming out in medicine now. Just tune into anything that Dr. Zach Bush says about health and this pandemic and the microbiome and how it starts in the soil. And when you grow things, heal the microbiome of the soil first, get it back to living, because we've been killing it for a very long time.
I'm glad you mentioned the doctors, because I'm sure some people that are watching. Do you have any other a website or some other names, reference sources for people that are really, I'm sure, really intrigued and curious about your story and the success you had with your mom?
Well, it's included in a Facebook link I put in the chat.
Okay.
Called it's Hemp Research of Michigan group that I started. It was around the time that I was still finding the success with my mom. And, but like you said, there's so many other uses for hemp. And we've done some really cool research on some of the more advanced forms of hemp. And they're particularly good for urban areas, especially places like Detroit, Ypsilanti, because of what you can do with hemp for remediation of soil, especially when combined with fungi, with mushrooms. The two in combination are probably the best 1-2 punch for remediating any soils. And I'm talking any soils, even radiation entrenched soil.
They're doing that in Japan, right?
Yeah. So when you combine the two, the University of Michigan, it was brought up earlier, the Green Wolverine, but out of the business school, also at U of M, they did a study. They entered the Patagonia Challenge to see how we could make land organic faster than 3 years. And they used hemp in that study. But I said, well, they should have combined mushrooms, because hemp is a bioaccumulator. So when it pulls these things out of the soil, you don't want to eat that unless you treat it with the fungi, because it will have accumulated all the toxins in the soil, including the asbestos and the other pieces that are already in there.
Mark, it's just fascinating to me. I can't wait to dive in more and learn. I miss you, man. We had some great conversation. Jamie,
yeah, can I just add that hemp itself, this discussion, this can be done without, I mean, the council can't prohibit somebody from getting a license, from the state to grow hemp and then growing hemp on their property.
Yeah.
I mean, just to put it in perspective for the purposes of this conversation, that's not, that could still happen. And a lot of people do like to participate in that. And for the reasons that Mark brings up, and that is a very powerful testimonial. And people like to be able to go in their own home or near their own home in their own community and buy and get their medicine instead of having to go into Ypsi or Ann Arbor or whatever.
Well, we had the Decriminalize Nature Ann Arbor, very successful campaign, which doesn't change the law, but decriminalizes it, making it the lowest law enforcement priority.
Yes. Yeah.
And that language was really good. also, and it mimicked several other cities across the world, across the country, that have also done it. And that just kind of opens the door for, hey, if we can grow it and we can then show its benefits without it having a negative impact on the environment. And I think there's a kind of a little bit of redlining going on in some of these urban areas.
I would definitely want to come back to that if I could. Excuse me for a minute, Mark. Jimmy, I know you had some things. I don't know if you were going to be able to stay past 5 or not, but I wanted to give you a chance to jump in and make any comments if you were going to leave or not.
Yeah, I can actually stay for about 15, 20 more minutes.
Well, I let everyone know I'm going to keep it to 5:20 at the latest. I think
Okay. Yeah, that'll work.
accomplishing everything that I wanted to and more before. Mark, and thank you, Jimmy. Mark, I had stopped you. I wanted you to continue, but also I don't know if you were in. In when I was talking about how it's always better to consume things closer to where it's grown. If you could finish what you were saying before I cut you off, and if you could help me out and explain why maybe that's better, the benefits of that.
Well, the whole economy is going to be shifting to local as a priority, simply because it makes so much more sense. For example, the public banking law change in California last year. That is a substantial change. This is something I'm pursuing in Ann Arbor also. I'm going to be working with Yusuf Rabi on identifying the targeted people around the banking structure, because we did have some legislation in Lansing about community banking, which was their version of public banking. Now, here's what public banking does. It insulates you from Wall Street. Public banking insulates you from the investment banks, which are tied at the hip to commercial banks. As a matter of fact, when Wall Street gambles away your money because it went from your commercial bank where you had it to the investment portfolios to be gambled with, and when they have a bubble burst or another couple of bets go bad in the derivatives market, you lose a lot of that capital. Well, public banking keeps your capital local. It decides who to invest in locally. And when they did this public banking legislation in California, they did it in 9 months on almost no budget, got 180 sponsors of organizations, and changed the law in the 6th largest economy in the world, all in 9 months. And it's a wonderful story, because once you get and keep your economy local, now you can decide, which groups are doing the best for the community, and let's fund them with grants and zero interest loans and other things, instead of just the zero interest loans being reserved for between commercial banks and or the central banking system. This also allows you to do like cannabis businessing. You can do any of that in that banking system.
There's someone I just so wish that I would have reached out to, a former member of our neighborhood association, but a real leader in local finance as far as knowledge and practice, Angela Barbash with Revalue, the community investing. Well, that's Revalue's was focus is non-fee advising, but and they have a broader focus too. They could best explain. But when I interviewed her, letting me know about the changes in federal law, which allowed for local lending, which had previously not been allowed. And it was such a major change in that you could get a pool of businesses together to raise equity and be lenders locally, and kind of in parallel with what you were saying in California. And she definitely would be someone I consult with, and people in that community investing. It's a lot of legislation that's really opened up a lot of avenues.
Yeah, I know Angela. I met her at an energy fair up in well, up in middle Michigan there somewhere. Yeah, she was really good and did a crowdfunding seminar up there. But yes, that allows you to also do some other things when you start getting your economy more locally focused instead of Wall Street focused. You eliminate so much risk, you save so much money in fees. It becomes really economical to keep your funds local. Now, the city of Ann Arbor still has theirs in Chase, but the new city commons has moved it over to the University of Michigan Credit Union, while we get the legislation passed for setting up community on public banks in the state of Michigan, or at least in Ann Arbor. But we want to see it go all the way throughout the state, because each local community deserves its own control of its economy. If you don't do that, you're just being governed and all your money is going out to be gambled by Wall Street. But this other thing that it allows is for alternative currencies, which is the second follow-on that you really want to explore. Because when I talk to investors now, I say, can you guarantee me what the US economy will be like in 3 years? Oh, and beside that, can you guarantee what the value of the dollar will be in 3 years? No, no one can. And it's very unstable right now. There's a lot of shifting. So we're going to be wanting to move to alternative currencies, cryptocurrencies, not Bitcoin. No, don't do that, because that's like the old model on steroids, really. And it gets slower the more people that use it. And it's now taking the power of Chile to process the ledger. So it's like ridiculous. But the new cryptocurrencies that are decentralized and distributed, those are the way to go to protect you from the dollar crash, because that's coming too.
Thank you, Mark. And to kind of bring it back home, we got about 15 minutes left. You mentioned uncertainty, Mark. Jimmy, can you give us a little certainty as far as like opportunities, a timeline on with the Board of Trustees, you know, for the public that wants to be engaged? You know, I'm going to put everybody's name and phone number so they can get in contact with y'all. But I want to let them know what to ask you and what to tell you.
Actually, I had two questions first, if you don't mind. One for
Please,
Mark
please.
and one for Jamie. Mark, when you say not Bitcoin, what cryptocurrencies would you say would be up and coming at this time that we're probably leading towards?
Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be running on a network called Holochain, which is not out yet, but it is the premier network for distributed, decentralized. It will even run blockchain applications much faster than the blockchain does. It is called a third generation post-blockchain framework. But there's not a real, you can invest in HOT, but that buys you what's called hollow fuel, but that's not what you're going to be investing in. That's to build out their network. The types of cryptocurrencies we can get to at a later date. There's some that are based on ecology. There's some that are based on regenerative practices like seeds. But that's still running on a blockchain fork called Telos.
Okay. And then when you spoke about public banking, what are some public banks here locally that right offhand that?
Yeah, we don't have public banks in Michigan.
Don't have any in Michigan at all.
Yep.
So that's the legislation you say that the USID may be trying to work on to bring that to Michigan, right?
Well, they started it back in 2017, I think, and it stalled in 2018. Somebody just made a kind of a poor assessment of it, and so it's been on hold for a while. But there is also public banking was announced before the election last year in Washington, so it's on the radar of a lot of people.
Thanks, Mark.
You had a question for Jamie too?
Yeah, Jamie, what when it comes to revenue sharing for all the different types of commercial, recreational marijuana in the industry, what could a local government, because I know that the revenue right now, obviously you mentioned the 1 billion, we're hitting here in Michigan, but when it really gets down to the local municipalities, what kind of percentage are we really looking at all the way down to Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, potentially Ypsi Township? What kind of revenue is it really trickling down to the local government?
Well, it hasn't yet, because by design, when it does, I don't know what the number is going to be. I can tell you kind of how it works. Right now, for the first year or possibly two, there will be up to $20 million donated to veterans organization doing research on PTSD and cannabis.
Oh yeah, I do remember that $20 million number. I thought we might have hit that now. So that's 20 million. Once the state hits 20 million taxes,
Yeah,
tax revenue.
And it's up to the state then if we go to another year or not, depending on how things are. Yeah. So other than that, though, the breakdown is 35% transportation for roads, 35% for education, schools, and the other 30% is for those who choose to opt in and license specifically retail stores and micro businesses. And that each one of those that's licensed is a unit in that share.
So local governments actually haven't received anything yet?
Not that I don't believe so.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that was all I had. And then what was your question, Alex?
Well, I was going to ask Jamie, it was connected to yours. So what that scenario, that 30% my understanding was that a portion of the revenue goes into that pool and then it gets split among 30%. That 30% gets split among the cities that opted in or municipalities that opted in.
Yeah, it hits the county first. Okay. And there's some formula that was created to do this exactly what it is. And that was more of a state contrived formula. It's not necessarily exactly printed in the law. So it hits the county first on some level and then goes down from there. I just wanted to say though, like, while that is a cool thing or potentially could be a cool thing, and I wish I had some numbers to say people have projected this, so they're out there. I'm just not prepared, and I apologize for that. But I will say that I've gone around for a decade with others and speaking with local decision makers about doing this without that even being a factor and being able to discuss a lot of advantages. So it's still a good thing, and it is for the retail locations to have the share. But the big cultivation centers and stuff create lots of jobs and clean up the area really nicely. And those things are very beneficial too.
Yeah, they contribute to resilience. I think that's the key word you want to use going forward, is build resilience in your communities, because it's such an unstable environment economically and even in governance that there's going to be a bunch of shifting going on over the next few years. It's already starting. And to build resilience into your community is the key word for everyone in office.
I love it. Sometimes you get invited to things to ask how you want to be identified. I said a harm reducer, resilience builder, because that's what this comes up so much when you're seeing that's what you can do with what you have. You build resilience, come from a position of abundance, and try to reduce the harm. Jimmy, I remembered what I wanted to get some clarity as far as how can we reduce the harm to people that want to really go in wide open, imaginative, and thinking what's best interest of Ypsi Township, a cannabis policy. What are the time points and how do they give input?
So we're going to be having another vote in March to
16?
Extend the current ban that's on in Ypsi Township for the purpose of having community engagement and actually putting some policy together. But like I said to you at the beginning of this, we've had plenty of time to do this, and so now I'm hoping that we can actually, me and you and whoever else activists in Ypsi Township, we can really push this forward and get something in place so we're not continuously moving that goal line back and keep moving it back, because obviously, like the other gentleman said, there's a lot of potential for growth for the whole community.
You know,
But
Denise
at that
Kershaw
March 2nd meeting, first Tuesday in March, it won't be on the agenda, but folks can definitely come out and at least voice their opinion. If you can get some residents to come out, that helps. But at the township board meetings, we get 2 or 3 people show up. So the more people that can come out will definitely force the hand of other electeds to move a little more swift.
I know you're incredibly accessible, and I really appreciate Trustee Swanson showing up here. And your phone number is listed. I know you're accessible also. But for like when we have public comment, typically people give public comment and then the meeting continues. Is there any other opportunity for citizens other than reaching out to trustees directly? Is there a chance for back and is there a form that's just set up for an exchange between the public and trustees?
A lot of times during the working session, the supervisor allows for a little more back and forth communication.
It's her discretion?
It's really at her discretion. But during the work session, what I've noticed is that she will allow more back and forth conversations. At the regular board meeting, 3-minute limit, and then we move on to the next agenda item. But the working session is a little more loose.
I don't think she wants to have a real healthy conversation about this. So I'll really encourage people to reach out but to appear and show up and let them know. So that's is there that March 16th that vote, can that be delayed or stopped or different language, or what are the options or that's just going to happen?
Technically, it could be stopped or prolonged. However, the sunset clause currently is March 31st. And if the sunset comes, then there's no ordinance in place. And that means we as local government kind of lose some of our ability to regulate kind of where we want things to be located, how many, and all the other different equity pieces that are in there. So if we go past that date, then.
So that's a concern, that's a risk, but that's a misinterpretation by the state, just to let you know.
Okay.
And it was challenged one time in Wayne County, and that concept lost. I've asked many times, where did that come from? I was one of the drafters.
That actually kind of came from our attorney. It wasn't anything I kind of came up with. He was just saying that, hey, if someone applies for a license,
yes, he's properly
whatever regulations were in place in your municipality.
If you're not opted out, they can just come in and then apply directly to the state. So that interpretation came from the state, and your lawyer was properly conveying what the state says about it. So you are right. I'm just pointing out that was never the intention, and I don't know how that interpretation got warped out of it. I mean, the language doesn't say it. It gives locals the ability to opt out, but it doesn't say you have to be opted out in order to stop something from coming in. If you, according to how it was written, if you just don't have an ordinance, then somebody couldn't come in because they don't have an ordinance to work with. But that's not how the state ultimately did that. But it was challenged one time so far that I know of, and that was in Wayne County. And those places that tried to open up and apply to the state were denied.
That's one of the, I tell you, I just think it's disingenuous on its face and nonsensical. And that's why I asked if the supervisor was high. What entrepreneur that wants to enter the cannabis industry is going to go to a hostile place? It would have to be zoned by the town. No one's going to do that. It's not going to happen. No one's going to go in this environment that's going to take all the effort and their capital to go engage in an area that's not friendly or that doesn't have the opportunity. They're going to need all those benefits. And that's just the common understanding in a real discussion with people in good faith.
So that said, it did happen in Hamtramck, even though that's also Wayne County. They just decided not to challenge it. They just went, okay, yeah, I guess you got in, but now they're good players. They still have to abide by a lot of parameters in order to stay in business. So they, it still kind of works, I guess, but you have to take control of it.
Highland Park's right smack in the middle of Wayne County, in Detroit. I mean, there's lots of opportunities for like clear discussion outside of who knows what happened in that. And we're Ypsilanti Township, in Washtenaw County.
And the other thing that can happen, and Alex, I think, toyed with the idea, a year or so ago, is there could be, even though it's a township and not a municipality that's incorporated under the Home Rules Act, because of the MRTMA, there can be a local ballot initiative to put the question to the people whether or not to opt in and how many licenses and what they should be. So
Right.
it would.
And some municipalities have done that, right?
Yeah, and it's additionally, I would think, important for the township, knowing that that's probably likely if there's not much action here, to take it under your own control.
Right.
And do it
If I'm
yourself.
sincerely interested in finding out how the township feels, I have to really look and look at the voter turnout and understand how what that represents. And I'm speaking of the August primary. Typically, we get about a 15% turnout. This year, it bumped up to the 30s. We had all absentee in a unique national situation. But given that on the average, we're only getting about 15% of the electorate that comes out.
That's
and this year, it's only
August. That's in an August election. Yeah.
What decides everything in Ypsi Township? You're going to have, there's never a viable Republican in November. You win in August, you won in you set the pot. But that's who puts people in that our current in our current situation, in our present situation. What it's been about a 15% turnout, and I don't, that has to be recognized. And if we really something this big, a $3 billion industry, we just don't want to do the same routes. And I'm glad you're ready to work with myself and others that are serious about it. I want to get the word out and get the people most affected by this to have input. Any questions? Anybody else? Yes. Trustee Swanson, please. Are you unmuted, or do I need to unmute you?
Second, you could, but for some reason I've lost my screen, so I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear and see you.
Can you hear me? Okay, I
Yes.
can't see you guys right now. So I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who's here and for the information that you've shared. I come from a school background, so I've been a teacher for 35 years in the Ypsilanti area. I've only lived in Ypsi Township my whole life. So when you talk about things like build resiliency in the community, you talk about reducing harm. I don't want to delay things, so I don't want anybody to think I'm saying delay, but in my experience working with people who've come in like in the school settings and wanted to do those things, if the school itself isn't prepared to kind of help plan and have a big voice, often there are a lot of unintended consequences. So I want to make sure, like I've heard a lot today, the things that I've heard, I value. But I also want you to know that as I'm listening, I'm brand new to the board. I've been a park commissioner, but I haven't been a trustee. And so when we talk about time, I just want to make sure that part of the resolution was that we would be getting the community engaged and we would be hearing from them. And I think that is valuable, not just at a board meeting. Coming to a board meeting is great, but also whatever those forums are need to be fully giving people an opportunity to not only have a voice, but we need people who are very knowledgeable to help share in. We can't just hand planning over to somebody else either. This is just me speaking personally from what I'm thinking. So I don't want people to think a vote to extend the resolution means like not an interest. But if you're going to build resiliency and you're going to make sure that what you put in place has equity, reduces harm, you've got to have a plan that's prepared to do that. So that's what I would want to say. I really appreciate the conversation. I appreciate what's been shared from very knowledgeable people who have experience in this.
Well, thank you, and I incredibly appreciate you appearing and having input. It's been sorely lacking in the past, and it's great to have a familiar, to see Jimmy and a new fresh face on the board, and you're confirming my excitement. So thank you. Hope to put that solid plan before you that's well thought out.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I lost my picture. I can't see any of you guys, but anyway, I really want to say thank you for holding a conversation. It was very informative, and to all the speakers. So Mark, I appreciate what you shared, and Jamie. So I appreciate just that you guys are approaching it from what would be best for our community.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything? I'm 2 minutes over. I don't want to add to the stereotypes about cannabis users and time or anything. So,
You're working harder and going longer, man. That's
yeah. I'm gonna unrecord, and thanks to everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.